Welcome back to another Broken Banners rambling shit session. In this one, we're going to be reviewing the Brotherhood without banners, though many of the units have banners. We'll get into that though. First, who are they? Eddard Stark, acting as Hand of the King for Robert Baratheon, sent out the Lord Beric Dondarrion with an assortment of his own House Stark guards, as well as some of Robert Baratheon's men, to bring in the outlaw and brigand Sir Gregor Clegane. While Beric is out on this mission, the Lannisters are able to kill Ned and take control of the Iron Throne, and quickly it's Beric and his loyal men who become the outlaws. Now they fight for the basic causes of the men and women of Westeros, launching raids and daring ambushes against the major houses that destroy the kingdom that they are supposed to protect. In the game, this is reflected as their faction pool composing of Stark and Baratheon units, to an extent, as well as some of their own ragtag raised militia, sworn knights who are fighting for the truth and rights of Westerosi men and women, and even some mercenaries that may be able to be paid from some pilfered Lannister gold or could have even defected to the true cause of the Brotherhood without banners. Today, to help me go through all of this, I'm bringing Tom. Tom is a long-term Stark player. He started back in 2020 with myself and Adam, and has stuck through the faction through thick and thin, including a time where Starks like Baratheons were way below neutrals on the ratings. That was, I think, when we were first doing our first events, right?
Oh, yeah, it was early on. Starks were sitting, I think, solid 7 or 6 out of 8 total.
Oh, yeah, we were deep in the negative ELO. We're talking like 40% win rate. Bruisers were 7 points.
Oof. Bruisers might even, I think Bruisers might have either not come out or just about to come out.
I think Bruisers were about to come out because they think came out same as Thornwatch, and they did the same. Enough down memory lane, though. He's competed in numerous events, and he never fails to impress. And most importantly, he is a beloved member of our community.
Well, that's nice to be appreciated. I'm happy to be here and just take a look at this new faction. As you know, a lot of things I like, and a lot of things that are going to bring some new lifeblood to the game.
Yeah, I am really excited. And the reason why we have a Stark player and a Baratheon player here is because, as mentioned, the Brotherhood without banners comes with a unique rule, which allows you to take a single Baratheon or Stark unit, not one of each, one or the other, with you when you build your army. So this is a mini faction that's going to be really easy to collect for prior existing players who have a Stark or Baratheon collection. If you have either of the two, you're basically already halfway through fleshing out the entire faction, maybe even the entirety if you don't want to pick out some of these units. Before we start diving into the Stark and Baratheon units that we're bringing in, let's look at what the Brotherhood has for itself, starting with the Humble Peasant.
They are 4 points, speed 5, saving 6/6, dice profile 6/4/3, pretty rough, hitting on 5s. Disrupt for -1 to hit on melee attacks. And to help everyone else out, including themselves, they bring Gang Up for a +1 to hit and +1 attack die while engaged with another friendly unit.
I think these guys are going to make for a fantastic utility piece. Like you pointed out, it's one of the cheapest units you can bring in the game. It's hard to go wrong with that.
What I immediately compare this to is Freeman and Targaryens. Freeman being 3 points, so 1 point cheaper, but you're also...
I think they're saving garbage, like 6-8. So
they're
going to take all of the damage on the hits. They're probably going to fail the panic test. I know I've one-shot them with Wardens, so they're bad. They die really easy. Granted, they're 3 points, but they have a mobility restriction, whereas Peasant Levy can go wherever the hell they want. And they're also bringing Disrupt, which is really stealthily increasing their survivability. Because as you mentioned, they have 12 wounds. You can't one-shot these guys, and they're going to be surprisingly resilient because they're not going to take as much damage as you think they should, especially with 6-up morale.
Yeah. And them being a full 12 infantry tray, allows you to bring attachments on them. And being a 4-point tray allows you to squeeze in a couple things you might not otherwise.
And we're going to look at some of those attachments shortly. Before we get there, let's keep going with the units. And I want to talk about what I think is one of the coolest looking units in the game. Model-wise, stat-wise, everything about these guys, I love them. They are the Brotherhood Sworn Knights. They're speed 5 with 3-up armor and 5-up morale, making them one of the faster, stronger heavy cavalry. Sorry, champions of the stag. And they're throwing 7/5 on 3s. Sworn Knights have their basic cavalry maneuver. Each model is going to be 3 wounds. What's really nice about them is they have knightly armaments, which is kind of akin to what the Hedge Knights have. They have Sundering, and similarly they have a zone effect If your opponent does not control the crowns, you get to reroll attack dice. That's going to make these guys so great on the long, drawn-out, grindy engagements because they are going to be hitting as hard as if they were charging on every single attack with Sundering. And that's only if your opponent does not control crowns. So that's going to work on a swords attack at the start of the round. And then they have discount Aldi's brand Rally the Small Folk, which is similar to Rally Cry, but worse. After this unit completes a melee attack, if this attack has destroyed an enemy rank, target one friendly infantry unit in long range, and they'll restore 2 wounds.
Yeah, this is just an all-around good unit. 8 points, so you're it is in the heavy cav category, which they do bring. They bring their defensive wise, like you said, 3-5. That is the heavy cav area. Having a native keyword, especially Sundering, on an attack, requiring no other zones or conditions of wounds or ranks, it makes life a lot easier. Coming from Starks, especially, where a lot of times you have to wait until our units are on their second or last rank to actually get those bonuses. It's nice to have something that just works from the get-go.
Yeah, and as it is, their stats are fantastic. 7-5. They have a great dice profile. Champions of the Stag and Flayed Men were deemed as too strong having a 7-5 dice profile, and they got knocked down to a 6-4, though I think Flayed Men might have always been a 7-4. But they're also still saving 3-5. So they have a better defensive profile than these mixed engagement cavalry had before, with a better offensive profile than they have now. They're still bringing a keyword, and they still have a utility piece to bring. Honestly, I think there's only one cavalry unit in the game that is better point for point value, and that's Tully Cavaliers. And I think that's a tight competition.
Yeah, personally, even as a Stark player, in a generalized, in a vacuum of looking at both these cards, I might actually want to take these Brotherhood Sworn Knights in, like, let's say 8 out of 10 lists, because on the charge, of course, they're fantastic. Charging is good in this game. That's just how it works. But in those prolonged fights where I cannot charge again, or I'm just getting locked down, especially against heavily armored opponents, if I work my tactics board correctly, I'm always going to have rerolls. Throwing 7 dice on 3s is still good.
Yeah, I mean, when you compare it on the charge, absolutely, Tully Cavalier are going to be better. You're throwing 9 dice on 3s with rerolls. Sworn Knights are going to be throwing 7 dice on 3 with Sundering and rerolls. So just as it is, Tully Cavalier have 2 dice. It's just a straight distinct advantage. But when we're looking at dice profiles alone on the engaged attack, now Tully Cavaliers are throwing 5 dice, whereas Brotherhood are still throwing 7. So when you're averaging across 2 attacks, both of them are throwing 14 dice with Sundering. The difference is Brotherhood Sworn Knights get rerolls on that second attack as long as the opponent doesn't control the crowns, which is really easy to do a lot of the cases outside of a couple NCUs like Joffrey Baratheon and Peter Baelish with his once per game. So I think the comparison between these two are great. Yes, obviously, as a Stark player, I'm sure you could tell us that, Ned and Winterfell Guardian have some great combos with Tully Cavaliers. So in a vacuum, I agree. I think Sworn Knights are probably on par, if not better, than Tully Cavaliers.
Yeah, I agree with that. You on with the comparison to Stark units, but we're introducing these Brotherhood Archers. They are a 6-point range unit. You have speed 6. We have a hidden shot with a long range hitting on 3s. We have 7-6-4 profile, which is short sword. It's there. I really hope you don't have to use it. 5 up, 5-4-3 profile. Saving armor save 6, morale save 6. What the order they bring is, I love this order. It's Deceitful Reposition. At the start of an enemy turn, if no enemies are within short range, this unit performs a 3-inch maneuver action. So immediately, I think the first time I read this, I immediately compared it to Tactical Repo. Maneuvering is just better than shifting, because you get to, I think you pointed out, you get a pivot, move 3 inches, pivot again. You can change facing twice. You can do a lot more with maneuver than shift, which really helps out because their weapon ability, Hidden Shot, ignores terrain and units when determined line of sight, just like Stark Bowmen do. And when attacking an enemy in the flank or rear, the attack gains precision and vicious. So you're really trying to put out some damage on there. In a vacuum, these guys are fine. They're a 6-point range unit. They're not really knocking my socks off. I don't think they're supposed to, which I think is okay. They're very mobile. Even just having 6 speed alone is very nice, but then being able to reposition very effectively, regardless of your claiming, the horse for maneuvers, marching, you can do a lot of stuff with their order.
Yeah, I agree. I think when you just look at the left side of these cards, they are somehow impressively worse than Stark Boatman, with the exception of their mobility, as you pointed out. And even with their damage profile, even with the flank bonus, you're getting precision and vicious, which is nice, but I'm not really being floored by that. When you compare it to Skyreach Archers, when you compare it to Lightbringers, even when you compare it to something like Stormcrow Archers, they're not really packing that huge of a punch, even when you're gaining those 2 extra keywords. It's the Deceitful Reposition that's really getting you there. Yeah. That's going to allow them to win a lot of range duels, because you're going to be able to maneuver outside of range. If you were 14 inches away, on your shot, you shift up 2 inches to get to 12 inches of the enemy unit. You shoot them. On the start of the enemy turn, you can move backwards and more towards the flank 3 inches. That will keep you out of range of the opponent shifting 2 inches and then shooting you. So you're going to be in a position where you can shoot without being shot back. So your 6/6 saves aren't as relevant. Obviously, if you get hit by cavalry, now you're in trouble. But as you said, with Deceitful Reposition and the rest of the kit that the Brotherhood has that we're going to be showing you shortly, it shouldn't be too terribly hard to make sure that you're not getting slammed by cavalry.
And not only that, through the commanders and the tactics decks, these guys can kind of fly across the map.
Oh, yeah. Before we get there, the last unit we're going to be looking at for the Brotherhood Without Banners is the Men-at-Arms. These are considered to be the other part of the backbone of the faction. It's also coming in the starter box, which is going to be 2 peasants, 1 Man-at-Arms, and 1 Brotherhood Archers. These guys are 6 points. They're saving 4/6, speed 5. Their dice profile is 7/6/4, hitting on 4s. And they have 2 abilities for their melee attacks: Ambush, and they have Brotherhood Armaments. They always have Crit Blow, and if your opponent does not control the crowns, this attack is going to gain +1 to hit and Sundering. So again, we're seeing that we want to deny the enemy the crown zones. And they're always going to have Crit Blow. So on a charge, these guys are going to have some solid potential, especially if you're getting into the flank or the rear. Flank or rear is already going to be giving you a bonus in attacking the enemy by diminishing their defensive value. You're going to be getting 2 condition tokens out onto them, and with Crit Blow, you can spike some pretty huge charges. When you've got Brotherhood Armaments in play, you're also going to be getting a +1 to hit and a Sundering. So now you're going to have a 6-point unit that's hitting on 3s, 7 dice, Crit Blow, and Sundering. On paper, these guys are looking great, especially when you factor in Gang Up off the Peasants. People are going to look at these guys and go, oh my god, it's a 6-point unit that's throwing 8 dice on 2s with Crit Blow, Sundering, putting out Panic Token and a Weaken Token. How can you go wrong with them, Tom?
The speed 5.
Yeah, I think that's where we start running into an issue.
So the speed 5, and you look at Ambush at the top of the card, and you go, okay, Ambush, that's a great ability. I find it's whereas the archers we just looked at, they have the ability, because of their maneuverability, to get there, where these guys, you'll have to put a lot more work to get that ambush off.
Yeah, it's going to be a lot more work. You're going to be spending resources to get the Men-at-Arms into the flank when you could have been spending the resources to get, say, Sworn Knights into the flank or the Archers into the flank. And we'll look at some of those resources later. And again, you can deny half of their melee ability if you take the crowns away from them. If you take crowns from these guys, they are Stark Sworn Swords. They are 7 dice on 4s with Crit Blow.
Yeah, and with Sworn Swords, at least when I go down in ranks, I arguably start getting better. I go from hitting on 4s to hitting on 3s, still retaining Crit Blow. And if I'm on my last rank, sure, I'm only throwing 5 dice, but I'm hitting on 3s with rerolls.
Yeah, and that's fantastic. I draw a lot of comparison from Men-at-Arms to Mountains Men. Mountains Men are pretty widely regarded as bad. So I would probably put Men-at-Arms somewhere between Mountains Men and Stark Sworn Swords. Mm-hmm. And I don't really see too many people, besides myself, raving about either of those. I should put out there, I think Stark Sworn Swords are cool, and I think Mountains Men are amazing. These guys are somewhere in between those two. I think it's going to take a lot of work to get the payoff that this 6-point unit has, which is a fatal flaw of a lot of 6-point units, which is you could have put in that work for a 7-point unit and gotten so much more value out.
And then I think you're bringing this maybe just as a naked 6-point unit, or maybe a unit that houses your commander, because you're bringing something else that's more unique, more expensive as your Baratheon or Stark option, or perhaps your neutral option.
Yeah, I think you're bringing these guys because you have to.
Yeah.
But that's one of the cool things about Brotherhood. You might not have to. Between neutrals, Starks, and Baratheons, you're going to have a really deep unit pool that we're going to get more into later, because we're not going to go over all 30 Stark and Baratheon options and then through the neutral options as well. At the very end of this video, Tom's going to go over the Stark units that he thinks fits best for the Brotherhood, and you guys should be looking to get a box for, and I'll do the same for Baratheons. But before you can really make that decision, and we can help you guys with that, we should probably look at what the rest of this faction offers, which is going to be the tactics deck. So, starting off, the Brotherhood Without Banners has a unique faction rule, and it's 2 parts. You get to reduce the cost of 1 attachment included in your army by 1 point, and your army may include 1 combat unit from either House Baratheon or House Starks as part of its non-neutral point limit. So you're going to be looking at 12 points of neutral plus up to 7 or even 8 points of Baratheon or Stark unit, as long as you're just choosing the 1 unit. So you might not have to take Men-at-Arms.
All right, so let's see what we got with these tactic deck cards, because there's a lot of interesting things going on here. We're going to start with the first one, Azor Ahai. When a friendly unit is performing a panic test after rolling dice, that unit can only suffer a maximum of 1 wound from failing this test. If it targets your commander's unit, it passes this test instead, and all enemies engaged with it become weakened. So, in the right case, this is a butt-saving card. This is your ace in the hole. Overall, it's a good card. It's a solid B to A. Having the ability to say, no, I don't take 3 wounds off. I don't bomb this panic test. No, thank you.
Yeah, and the auto pass on the commander obviously goes without saying. That's amazing. Auto pass is always great. Even reducing the wounds down to 1, because this is after dice are rolled. If you've already rolled a 1 on the dice, you could just keep holding this card in hand. But if your unit had 2 or 3 wounds left on it and you bomb that final panic test and this unit's about to die, Azor Ahai can save you from that. It can save you from dropping a rank and potentially losing an objective. It can do so much for you. I think the only weakness of this card is the fact that you have to sit on it to get value. If you draw it round 1 and you're afraid that round 2 or round 3 or round 4 you're going to need it, that's a card that's sitting in your hand and not doing any good for you between then and now. However, when you need this card and you play it, it feels so damn good. The next card we're going to look at is the Knights of Hollow Hill. When a friendly combat unit is targeted by an enemy ability or tactics card, that unit performs 1 morale test. If you succeed, cancel the effect of that ability or tactics card. Then, that unit may perform a 3-inch maneuver or action. This card right here is giving you 2 incredibly powerful effects on the same card at the same time. Martell player is going to dump Rising Temperatures on you. No thanks. Put that card directly into the discard pile. Instead, I'm going to make a 3-inch maneuver, get myself closer or even into your flank, and I am going to punish you so hard on your turn.
Yeah. I think there's a whole host of applications for this card that we don't really have time to go through every single instance. It's a good card. It's going to be used. It's just a good card.
There's just one downside to it. And that's not even the fact that you have to hold this card in hand. This is a card that's worth holding for the entirety of the game. You have to pass your morale test.
Yes, but as we'll see later on, there are ways that you're going to make that easier for yourself. Next card we're going to look at is called Take Up the Sword. When a friendly combat unit activates, that unit performs 1 morale test, seeing a trend here. On success, choose 1. It removes 1 wound plus 1 additional wound for each of its destroyed ranks. Target 1 enemy combat unit in long range. It becomes panicked and weakened. So this card, I don't think it's breaking any windows. It's not really again, a solid B to an A tier if we're kind of going there. I like it. It has a dual function. Again, with the caveat, you have to pass the morale test.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. That's something that we see as a problem. Every Lannister player will complain. Half my deck doesn't work if my opponent passes their panic test. It doesn't work. It's no good. I hate having my cards tied to morale tests. And to an extent, I agree. Everyone's had those cards, Night's Watch players, Baratheon players even, where you don't pass the morale test, you don't get to have the card's effect. What really sucks with Take Up the Sword and Knights of Hollow Hill is that the card is discarded if you fail the morale test. There's going to be instances where you play a card to do nothing but put it into the discard pile. What's really nice about Take Up the Sword, and why I would probably rate it higher than Knights of Hollow Hill, is the ease of trigger. When a friendly combat unit activates, you're going to see, you have seen it on the units, and you're going to see it on the attachments, there's really not much competition for when the friendly combat unit activates. So even if Take Up the Sword ends up doing nothing, at least you didn't really give up anything for it other than the card. Take Up the Sword's not a card that's going to sit in your hand. You can use it when you're full health to put out some tokens. You can use it when you're beat up to heal back. It's a flexible card that's always good whenever you draw it and whenever you get an opportunity to play it. The next card we're going to see is also a unique Brotherhood card, the Forgotten Fellowship. I think this is simultaneously the best and the worst card in the entire deck. Start of any round, target one friendly combat unit. It performs one march or retreat action, then becomes weakened. This is incredible. The rounds where you get to go first, you can go ahead and march and put yourself into a fantastic position for a charge. Yes, you get weakened, but sometimes it's worth it, even if just to lock up the unit. Being able to throw your peasants 10 inches forward before you even have to activate them can get them into a place where your opponent can't ignore them. It can get your archers out of danger. It can get your men-at-arms where you need them to be. Likewise, on the rounds where you go second, you can use this to go ahead and retreat, in which case, who cares if you're weakened? It's going to deny your opponent an effective usage of the swords, because now you are no longer engaged. Swords is one of the most powerful tactic zones in the game, but it's only really useful if you've got a long-range unit that can shoot someone, or if you've got engaged units and you can make that melee attack. I think this card's great. The downside is the start of round trigger.
Yeah, start of round, it's kind of rough. You get it once a round, that's it.
Yeah, and not just that. If you draw into it with letters, that's sitting for the rest of the round.
It's true, but I think this is the type of card, much like Assault Orders in Stark's base deck, this is one of the cards you build your round-to-round planning around. Because, like Esad's gone over all of the myriad of things you can do with this card. It is a game changer. It offers a lot of power that makes your opponent have to worry. It sets the momentum in your favor. So we're gonna move. I think that was we're gonna move on to a okay card. I like it, but it's nothing special. Sudden Retreat. It's fine. I think it is one of the weaker cards in the deck, but it's still fine. It's not a dud.
A common trend I think we're seeing with this deck is a lot of these cards are great when you have the right moment to play them, but they're going to sit in your hand a lot. Sudden Retreat, I think when you do manage to play it, though, can really have a game-changing effect. And I think this fits so perfectly with this ambushy, skirmishy faction to always have the threat of Sudden Retreat in there, especially since they have access to some Crit Blow infantry and, technically, Lance Cavalry. Sudden Retreat in the base deck can be horrifying.
Yes, this is something, while it's not a powerhouse on its own, is something an opponent will have to consider while they are planning their turns.
Likewise, Regroup and Reform is another card that we've seen before. This is just a really solid card, especially considering you've got a 4.12 wound infantry unit. You can just take models off of that and restore it onto another. It's notable that this is specifically for infantry, and it's specifically models that you're removing. So this isn't going to help your cavalry, but this is going to be really great to take wounds off of those peasants that your opponent is wisely ignoring. Or if your opponent is sinking resources into the peasants, you can take it off of a safer unit, such as your ranged unit, and put it there. Or you can take an attachment from one side of the battlefield and move it a little bit further in, so it starts getting useful again.
All right, the last card in the deck is another unique card, But the Realm Remains. Start of any turn. Each time a friendly infantry or cavalry unit is destroyed, place 1 order token on this card. At the start of a friendly turn, you may remove 1 order token from this card. If you do, restore 3 wounds to this unit. While this card has an order token, the attached unit may not gain condition tokens. So, like many of the other cards we've seen in other decks, it's a oath card. It is a card that is triggered by the death of a friendly unit.
But the Realms remains is definitely unique in the regard that you can remove an order token from it. Every other quest card in the game, once you put an order token on it, that's it. It's turned on. They're very binary. But the Realm Remains actually, one, allows you to make use of having multiple order tokens on the card. If your Sworn Knights manage to see both of your peasants die, you'll have 2 tokens on them. And you can, at the start of a friendly turn, remove 1 and still be immune to condition tokens, and then the next turn, remove another order token, restoring 6 wounds. It's helping your Forgotten Fellowship not give you the downside with it. It's a really powerful oath card. Obviously, the biggest downside to it, well, there's 2. 1, it has to see a unit die, so it doesn't do you any good if it comes out the turn after your unit's died. And 2, your unit has to die. Yes, obviously you're not going to cry if your peasants are the ones dying, but you'd prefer if they didn't.
I think overall, this faction is a little more forgiving in that sense because of the peasants. So I think there's a little more leeway with that than other factions.
Yeah. What we're seeing with the deck so far combined with the units is a faction that likes to be able to move around and they take control of the battlefield. Their units are where they want them to be. They are not going to be stuck in engagements that they don't want to be stuck in. They are going to be in positions where they can make the most of their abilities and most of their damage. Something that we're not seeing here, though, is the ability to spike damage. These guys are going to be wherever they want to be, but you might not need to be afraid of them. Unlike Targaryens, who can spike some extra keywords, or Starks, who can do the same. Unlike Greyjoys, who can find some extra rerolls or condition tokens packed away in their deck, or Lannisters, who can bomb extra damage onto your panic test. These guys, their offensive capability is what you see on the battlefield, and is what we've seen with some of these prior units is not terribly impressive. Sworn Knights are solid, and you can spike a really big hit with some Crypt Blow. If the opponent doesn't have the crowns, you'll have Sundering, but we're not seeing anything insane. We might be able to see some of that in the commanders, though, so we're going to start diving into those. The first is the big man himself, Beric Dondarrion. He's got the Order Sentinel, he's also got Duty to the Crown, and he's got Pathfinder. Beric Dondarrion is really embodying the essence of the Brotherhood here. And with that, he has 3 cards, Assault Orders. So we've got Sentinel and Assault Orders here to really help spike some additional damage, which is exactly what we were talking about needing.
His other card, which is a unique card, is called Lightbringer. After a friendly combat unit completes a melee attack, target 1 enemy unit in short range of the attacker. It suffers 1 panic test with -1 to their roll for each of their destroyed ranks. If the attacker is Beric's unit, the targeted unit also becomes panicked. So we have here a panic bomb card. It does not necessarily have to be on the unit you attacked. It can be on a unit just long range, but it's another way to spike damage that isn't necessarily on just rolling attack dice.
Yeah, I think the fact that it can hit a unit that's not necessarily the one he's attacking is really useful, especially like we were talking about with certain game modes. Dance with Dragon and Feast for Crows, you drop the objective if you fail a panic test. So being able to attack one guy and then the guy next door has to take a panic test with potential negative modifiers to it can really help get some objective control.
Mm-hmm.
His final card, and this is another unique one, is 6 times too many, which I just absolutely love for the lore. Little bit of lore background. Beric Dondarrion has been resurrected numerous times by Thoros of Myr, the Red Wizard who accompanies him. Every time that he comes back, he says that he loses a little bit more of him. And he has said that 6 times too many has he been brought back. And this card allows him to come back just 1 more time. When a friendly infantry unit would be destroyed by a melee attack, that unit is not destroyed but instead remains in play with 1 wound. Attach this card to the unit until the end of the game. While attached, this unit cannot be targeted by friendly or enemy orders or tactics cards. This is a double-edged sword. It's going to help protect him from things that might finish him off, cards that are going to bop him, such as Lightbringer while he's vulnerable. At the same time, it's also going to stop things from healing him. You're not going to be able to regroup and reform to get him off of that tray. He is going to make his valiant last stand. You're not going to be able to put more wounds onto him, and he's not going to be able to sentinel anymore. He's lost a little bit more of himself.
That's very true. There are ways to get around the healing from your cards, but it's a little more effort.
If you can get But the Realm Remains, that's going to give Beric just a little bit more juice to fight. You can still target him with the bags, and you're going to see one of his NCUs can still help him out. My personal favorite, but we'll get to her later.
The next commander we have is the aforementioned Thoros of Myr, the Red Wizard. Thoros' command attachment brings faith abilities. So at a flat rate, you're getting a +2 to morale test on the unit you bring him in, and he begins the game with 1 faith token. Each time he passes the morale test, he gets another faith token, and then he can expend those tokens in one of the 2 following ways. Firstly, when this unit performs a melee attack before resolving that attack, the attack gains Sundering and Vicious. So there is another way to spike some damage on your units. His other faith ability, when an enemy in long range fails a panic test, that target 1 friendly unit in long range of this unit, so specifically Thoros' unit. For each wound the enemy suffered from this test, restore 1 wound to that friendly unit up to 3. So at a base, he has a personal way to buff his unit with some damage with Sundering and Vicious, and then he also has a small way to potentially hint out some healing to his other units.
And what I think is really notable here is that it's when an enemy in long range fails a panic test. It doesn't have to be at the hands of a melee attack, and not even his melee attack. So if your Brotherhood archers sink a vicious attack into the enemy's flank, they're going to be taking that at a -3. Thoros is probably going to pass his morale test because he's got a better morale because he's bringing +2 to his own unit. So he's probably going to generate a faith token, which he's going to immediately expend when the enemy fails that -3 panic test and loses 1 to 3 wounds. And he's going to be able to heal himself or somebody else in long range another 3 wounds, such as that ranged unit. I think it's a really useful ability that can keep cycling into itself and has a nice subtle benefit with the other units. For his cards, 2 of them we've seen before. The first one is Fiery Charge. It's hard to beat something that lets you say, I rolled a 6 on this. You're going to be landing that max distance charge. You're going to be putting out a panic token, which is going to synergize with his abilities because he's giving himself Vicious and he's going to heal people when he passes. And he's going to be healing people when the enemy fails that panic test. It's synergistic, it's great, it's aggressive.
His next card, another one we've seen before, is Loved by the Small Folk. Oh, it's a good card. It's fine.
It's nice when it works.
That's when it works.
The last card is one that, again, is really thematic specifically to Thoros, The Last Kiss. Thoros is probably the best of R'hllor's priests when it comes to his ability to give the last kiss. It's the ability to essentially resurrect someone by putting the flame of life back into them. And he does that whenever a friendly attachment would be destroyed. Instead of being destroyed, place that attachment in a combat unit of the same type, ignoring the usual attachment restrictions, replacing a model as usual, or at the start of any turn, draw 1 tactics card. That's really nice because this is the kind of card that's going to sit in your hand. Inexplicable Return is, in my opinion, the worst card in the game because it's also dependent on a friendly attachment being destroyed and has some pretty specific timing restrictions. The Last Kiss recognizes that and allows you to pitch this card to help you dig for Fiery Charge so you could just go kill the asshole on the other end of the table. The Last Kiss is really nice because it can let you build some really silly combinations if you manage to lose an attachment by putting it in with something else, ignoring restrictions. This is also really unique because the specific wording is going to allow you to put cavalry attachments onto other cavalry units. So if you're running, say, Zorse Riders with a Fortune Seeker, and the Zorse Riders die, you can move that Fortune Seeker on over to your Sworn Knights. It's really interesting and really unique and helps give Thoros a lot of extra capability and might even incentivize him as a cavalry-based commander.
We're going to move on to our final commander for the Brotherhood. We have the one, the only, Lady Stoneheart. She brings Horrific Visage. She also brings Intimidating Presence.
So, Lady Stoneheart, like Thoros, has 2 cards that we've seen before. Lash Out and Price of Failure. there's a subtle synergy between Catelyn Stark and peasants, which is unique because you wouldn't think you'd want to stick your commander in there. But Catelyn Stark is going to further disincentivize attacking those poor, helpless souls. With Lash Out and Price of Failure, those peasants will actually be able to do a 1-2 hit back at you, hitting you pretty hard with the Lash Out after you take a rank or two off of them, and then Price of Failure is going to max out their damage, really helping round out her kit. And the final card she's bringing is unique to her. Vengeance in Blood. After an enemy completes a melee attack, if it destroyed a friendly rank, target one friendly combat unit that was not the defender. They may perform one maneuver or march action. If this targets Catelyn's unit, they may perform one charge or attack action instead. This is something of a subtle callback to Ned Stark's own card, Fury for the Fallen, which is also allowing you to make charge or attack actions with his unit whenever one of his allied units are being attacked. Catelyn Stark's a little slower in the draw. She needs a friendly rank destroyed. However, she's not as selfish. She allows a friendly combat unit that was not the defender to make a maneuver or march action, which is again reiterating the Brotherhood's nature as this skirmishy ambush faction. There's one other additional ability to Catelyn Stark that we need to address.
So, if you are bringing Catelyn Stark as a commander or an NCU, there's a couple rules you have to follow. Now, for those of you who don't know, Catelyn Stark was, spoiler alert, murdered at the Red Wedding with her son and a whole host of Northmen. So, when she's back from the dead, she's still kind of pissed off about that. So, there's a couple guys you can't bring to this party anymore that I don't with. So, if you're bringing Catelyn Stark in any way as an NCU or a commander, you cannot bring House Bolton units, the Dreadfort Captain attachment, the Bolton Flayer attachment, Roose Bolton as a commander or NCU, Ramsay Snow as a commander and NCU, or Walder Frey, who you probably weren't bringing anyway. In addition to that, those names being off the guest list, friendly combat units may reroll any charge distance dice when performing charge actions against the units listed above, units containing the above listed attachments, or House Lannister units.
As if Bolton units didn't have it hard enough.
Yeah, it's kind of rough. I mean,
they deserve it.
They deserve it. And this isn't a video about how Bolton's could or should be better. This is a... Nah, screw them. They deserve
Screw them. Lannisters, too. I've never felt bad for a Lannister player. The other restriction that Catelyn Stark has, both as her commander and her NCU, is that she may not be fielded in an army containing Beric Dondarrion, because, another spoiler, Beric Dondarrion gives his flame, his last kiss, to Catelyn Stark to bring her back. So Beric has to be dead for Catelyn Stark to exist, and I think this is the best time for us to start going into the NCUs, which is going to really help flesh out the rest of this faction. And we'll start with Catelyn Stark. Again, you cannot field her with Beric Dondarrion, so if you're not running her as a commander, and you're running her as an NCU, you basically have to run her with Thoros or one of very few neutral commander options, since you can't run Roose or Ramsay. Her NCU is pretty wicked. She has the influence Vengeance at any cost. While influencing an enemy combat unit, each time that unit performs an action, before resolving that action, they suffer one wound. As if that wasn't bad enough, friendly combat units may re-roll any attack dice when performing melee attacks against this unit. So this entire influence is basically screw Gregor Clegane. Screw him hard. He's going to take a wound when he makes his cavalry maneuver. He's going to take his wound when he makes his action. And then you're also going to have charge rerolls against him, and you're going to go ahead and get attack rerolls against him. Even if you're not using this against a Lannister unit or a solo, this is giving something that brothers really want. A little bit of extra damage to poke through, and rerolls on their attack to give them the consistency that they need.
4 points NCU, so that's fantastic. What she brings for 4 points is insane. She's a little bit more diversified version of Daenerys Khaleesi in Targaryens, who gives the unit she's influencing rerolls on their attacks, where you can give everybody rerolls against a certain... You're switching off, it's one unit, but your entire army gets rerolls on it. That's pretty cool.
Those peasants are going to be a whole lot scarier than you originally gave them credit to once they get gang up triggered and they've got rerolls.
Yeah, it's a little unfortunate. It's only on melee attacks, but that's fine.
It's fair.
So our next NCU is Thoros of Myr, the Ember. Each time a rank in an enemy combat unit is destroyed, place one order token on Thoros. So that's combat, that is infantry or cav. Each time Thoros claims a zone, you may replace that zone's effect with restore up to 2 wounds to one friendly combat unit. Then you may remove up to 2 order tokens from Thoros. If you do, for each token removed, restore 1 wound to one friendly combat unit. So what Thoros brings is a good amount of healing. And you can diversify your healing across the board because it's not his second apart. When you remove your order tokens, you do not have to target the same units. You can spread out a little bit.
And most importantly, I think what's really nice about this is that it's giving you something useful to do with the crown zone. We saw in a few units before that you want to make sure your opponent doesn't control the crowns, which means you probably want to take the crowns. What do these guys care about making you take a panic test? What they do care about is being alive and healing. Thoros having a built-in replacement that is made more powerful as the fight goes on really fits the Brotherhood kit nicely. And another issue I think we're starting to see with the faction, which I think is a part of a brilliant design to help keep it interesting and balanced, is you have a lot of these essential characters, NCUs, commanders, that can be fielded in very specific ways. If you're running Thoros Commander, you're not running his NCU, but you can run Caitlyn Stark. If you're running Caitlyn Stark as your commander, you're not running Beric Dondarrion anywhere else in your list, but you could be running Thoros as an NCU. It's very difficult to balance all of these. But there are 2 NCUs that do not have any restrictions, and I think these are going to form the staple of what you're working around. I'm going to start with my favorite, arguably one of, if not the worst NCUs in the game, according to many people, but I really think they're sleeping on Ravella Smallwood, the Lady of Acorn Hall. She has the ability Allies in the Realm. Ravella begins the game with 3 orders tokens on her. At the start of a friendly turn, you may discard 1 order token and a tactics card. If you do, restore 2 wounds to one friendly combat unit. If that unit has only 1 remaining rank, they also remove a condition token. So again, we're seeing some condition play in the positive removing way here. She has a very steep cost. She's only bringing 3 order tokens, and you have to discard tactics card to restore 2 wounds. So she's healing at most 6 wounds throughout the game, but she's also going to be discarding cards along the way. A lot of people think she's pretty shit.
For 4-point NCU, I think she's definitely at the lower end of usefulness. Again, you're healing, but it feels like you're spending a card to heal 2 points. So I'm sure when it comes down to the wire, that will save people's games. Those 2 wounds will save you, but she's not being proactive, and she's not really saving, shattering anything. She's not breaking any records here. You can take it or leave her between running her or running one of your neutral options, I think, depending on taste, really.
Yeah, a lot of people have rightfully said that, why would you take Ravella when you could take a Varys or Shay? Here's what I would say about Dear Ravella. If you were to reword her card and put a spin on it, I think a lot of people would be more positive. You could reword Ravella to say this. Ravella begins the game with 3 order tokens on her. At the start of a friendly turn, you may discard an order token to add an ability to a card. Start of a friendly turn, discard this card, heal a target unit 2 wounds. If it only has 1 remaining rank, remove 1 condition token from it. It's the same effect, but it sounds different. It sounds like you are using the card for a different purpose. And I think healing is really important to this faction. Being able to remove condition tokens is always great, but being able to so quickly at the start of a friendly turn, in combination with other things such as putting Thoros onto a zone and healing 4, healing another 2 with Ravella on top of a regroup and reform, you can spike some massive healing out there. And as we addressed with the tactics deck, a lot of these cards have very specific timing restrictions and very specific effects. Against certain factions like Night's Watch, you're never going to play Knights of Hollow Hill. You might draw into Forgotten Fellowship, and you already had one in hand. You've got 2 of those. You only can play 1 of them. So why not discard it and heal 2? You're probably going to discard it at the end of the round anyway. Now you're getting value out of something you were going to do before.
I think it's a little early to be wish listing how to make this faction better already, but I appreciate it. I appreciate it. I personally would see you're already spending. You have a limited resource because you only have 3 order tokens. You're not getting them back. So it's a little odd to have to spend a card already, even though there is a reason. Like, it's good to get rid of cards out of your hand so you can draw more cards. But there's room for improvement. I don't think everything can't be a winner. Everything can't be fantastic.
I agree. Not every NCU can be as good as Ravella's Small World. What do you think about the Ghost of High Heart, the final NCU?
I think the Ghost of High Heart is probably going to be the backbone of this faction. I think I don't know if there's going to be very few cases where you don't run her, but I think you're more often than not are going to be running her. So what she brings is an influence. When influencing a friendly unit, they get +1 to morale tests. Hey, we like taking morale tests here.
We do like taking morale tests here.
And then each time a rank in that unit that's being influenced is destroyed, one enemy they are engaged with becomes both vulnerable and weakened. So again, 4-point unit, 4-point NCU, bringing a buff to your morale, and also bringing some retroactive defense for your units. I think you're bringing her for the first part, and the second part is happenstance. You want that +1 to morale on your units because there's a lot of morale tests that need to be made in this faction.
I agree. I think if you never put out a single condition token with her, she's worth taking at 4 points. This faction needs to pass its morale test so badly, and you're going to see with some of the other attachments, there's just more and more incentive to do it. But you've already seen it with Beric Dondarrion bringing duty to the crown, and you've seen it with Thoros with a faith ability. You want to pass your morale tests. The condition tokens definitely should not be discounted. 2 condition tokens when you drop rank is impressive. The only other thing I really want to mention with this NCU is, technically speaking, an influence is an enemy or a friendly. You get to decide when you put it out.
Yes.
Axel makes use of that because Axel Florent puts out a different effect when you influence a friendly versus an enemy unit. Ghost of High Heart doesn't have to influence a friendly unit, and her ability applies either way. I cannot for the life of me figure out why on earth you would want to give an enemy unit +1 morale test and make it so that when they lose a rank, they're putting out 2 condition tokens. But god damn it, you can do it.
I think they just saved on the ink of writing friendly. Those, 7 characters?
Or maybe Brotherhood Without Banners is about to revolutionize the 3v3 meta. Maybe they are going to shake up the multiplayer. There is a free-for-all game mode rule in the base rulebook where you can have multiple players at the same table. She is the queen of diplomacy.
Yeah, there's a lot of things in that rulebook we don't talk about.
Let's talk about things that we will talk about. Let's talk about
things
attachments.
worth talking about.
Things worth talking about. And attachments are really fun to talk about with this faction because you get to bring a free point of attachment. Woo! And you're going to see in a lot of these attachments, god damn it, you are paying for that price.
Okay, so we start with our Thoros of Myr attachment, and he brings reinforcements. His second ability, which is the reason he's 2 points, is Relentless. So depending on which combat unit you're putting this on, things get silly real quick.
I think Thoros of Myr is a great 2-point attachment. I would probably run him in Baratheons. I'd probably run him in a lot of lists. The fact that you can get him for 1 point less makes him fantastic. And the only reason I think this is okay is because he's competing with an amazing commander and an amazing NCU. Another 2-point attachment that I would happily pay 2 points for, and the fact that you can maybe get him away for 1 is really amazing, is Beric Dondarrion, Azor Ahai. He also has a faith ability, Lightbringer. Beric's unit begins the game with 1 faith token. Each time Beric's unit passes a morale test, it gains 1 faith token. Faith tokens may be expended to do the following. When this unit performs a melee attack, before resolving that attack, this attack gains 2 attack dice. Or, when this unit would be destroyed by a melee attack, before being removed, this unit performs 1 melee attack using its lowest attack die value. If this attack destroys the defender, this unit is not destroyed but remains in play with 1 wound. So again, we're seeing Beric Dondarrion just goddamn does not die. And I think this is really thematic, it's really fun, it's really powerful. His first faith ability, allowing him to get 2 extra attack dice, is huge. The game has really been scaling back how much attack die an unit can throw it once. So being able to spike an extra 2, especially when you have access to Criplo units like Kingsmen, the Stark roster, and Men-at-Arms, can be devastating. Having a 9-die Kingsman attack coming at you is horrifying. And just when you think you've killed them, they're going to swing back at you. And maybe they get another big lucky crit and they manage to kill you. That unit will stick around. Mm-hmm. Even if it only happens 1 out of 100 times, this attachment, I think, is a good pick for 2. And if you can get it for 1, that's a steal. Again, you've got the restriction of not having Catelyn Stark in your army and you're not running Beric Dondarrion.
Yeah, I think he is an attachment you want to bring on a unit that already brings a lot of good stuff, like you said, like something that spikes itself. But I think it's more for flavor. I don't think he's gonna be winning any awards on his own. But I think it's definitely he's worth picking, and it's just fun to play with.
Yeah, and I think we're going to kind of see a similar theme with some of the other 2-point attachments. Even though there's no list building restrictions with them, we'll let you guys make those decisions.
All right, our next 2-point attachment is Angui, and he's so angry, he's the archer.
He's just so angry, the archer.
He's there too.
Oh, good old Anguy. What's he do, Tom?
Well, if he was there, he's not going to be there soon enough because his order is Swift Retreat. Is a good ability, but it's also not earth-shattering. He also brings Outflank. So for 2 points, I'm sure he's not worth 2 points.
He's not worth 2 points. He's worth 1 point. He is built around your 1-point reduction.
And even then, why would I spend that on him versus Thoros? Or
because you're running Thoros as an NCU or as a commander, and Beric, you're either running Catelyn Stark or you're running him as a commander. The 2 that are so hard to run get to be incredibly powerful and borderline overpowered because they know you have to run them and you can't actually really run them as an attachment without making huge sacrifices in your list. So to counter that out, the 2-point attachments you can actually run are overcosted.
Yeah. I know Outflank is... I don't know. I personally don't... I'm sure there's some build.
I'm going to stick him in Thornwatch.
True, yeah.
I'm going to love him in Thornwatch. I think he could be funny in Stormcrow Dervishes. He's not going to be good, but I'm going to love him. Likewise, I love Gendry. Gendry is a Baratheon. He really is taken after Robert on this because he gives you everything the Baratheons want. He's got order resilience, and he's got improved defenses. While you control the crowns, this unit gains +1 to defense dice rolls. This is a Baratheon attachment if I've ever seen one in my goddamn life. Just like the Thoros attachment has got relentless and reinforcements. Baratheons have always wanted this, and I'm so excited I get to stick this in a Baratheon unit.
Just not in Baratheons.
Just not in Baratheons.
Again, it's a 2-point unit. I think he's better than Anguy.
He's better than Angui.
Yeah, because he actually does something that you want to bring. Move down to our 1-point attachments. And who better to start us off with that than the lovely, the jovial Hot Pie, the baker. He has 1 ability, Hot Pies. Each time this unit activates, it removes 1 condition token. If you control the crowns, this unit restores 1 wounds. I'd gladly pay a point for that.
I'd pay a point for that. I think it's really cool with the Forgotten Fellowship. You can make yourself do a march, and then you activate the unit to declare a charge, and you just remove that weakened token right back off.
Yeah. Or there's a whole host of cards that, after the attack resolved, whether conditionally or unconditionally, will give you a condition token on your unit. He just goes, nah, I don't feel like it.
Yeah, and if you control the crowns, you get a little bit of healing to go with it. Like, honestly, for 1 point, I'd probably work him into a lot of lists. I'd probably put him in a lot of peasants a lot of the times.
Yeah.
And if you're not putting an attachment in anyways, and you are getting a free attachment that you're not using on something else, I definitely take him for free. I don't see them too often, but a really funny interaction with him and Bog Devils is Bog Devil's Poison says that whenever you would remove a condition token, you can instead remove this poison. So Hot Pie is the greatest poison detector and defense in the game. He is just cranking out antidotes in his little bagels and scones.
True. I mean, his baking saves the Brotherhood. Keeps them going.
So it does. Next 1-point attachment is a fantastic 1-point attachment that we've seen in a bunch of other factions, and it's just Battle Scars. It's on Lemon Cloak. That's something that's really cool because we don't see any access to highest attack die value in this faction, which is something Stark's pretty generally rely on. So being able to stick battle scars in berserkers without having to take Meg Mormont, I think is amazing.
Yeah, as a 1 point attachment, I would gladly have this in Starks. I would throw this so many places. I think, and I don't think anyone would ever disagree. They would love to have this in any faction. And we move on to one of our other 1 point attachments, Tom Seven Strings. He brings Order Taunt. Trash, I don't care. Get it out of my face. I don't. It could be free, and I probably still wouldn't take it. Like, we just went through all those attachments. I'd rather pay full price for Gendry than take Tom for 1 point.
Yeah, I'm with you. Someone who I would gladly pay 1 point though is the last Brotherhood attachment. Edric, I'm only 12 Dane. He's got 2 abilities on him: Barrack's Vassal and Regroup. This model counts as Beric Dondarrion for all abilities and effects, which is amazing considering how many of Beric Dondarrion's cards care about him, how there are many cards that care about being the commander's unit. Edric Dane having Vassal is going to be incredibly useful. Even better is that he's got Regroup. After completing a retreat action, this unit restores 2 wounds plus 1 wound for each of its destroyed ranks. You have 2 different cards in your base deck that are going to let you make free retreats. You're going to be able to heal off those in addition. That's fantastic. You can put him into units that are going to be making retreats, such as Bog Devil, such as Stormcrow Dervishes. Mm-hmm. You have units that can make cheap, effective retreats. And Edric Dane is included in a unit containing Thoros of Myr. He ignores the usual attachment restrictions. Now, you might be thinking, oh, you were just harping on the fact that, you're never going to run Thoros attachment because you're running him as an NCU or a commander. Well, if you're running Beric Dondarrion, you're not running him as a commander. And if you're taking a neutral NCU, you can spare having to take the Thoros NCU, and now you're going to be able to stick him in there. So now you can put him in something like Stormcrow Dervishes.
With Relentless.
And you can discount the price of one of those attachments.
And it counts as your commander's unit.
So now you've got Stormcrow Dervishes with Relentless, with Reinforcements, with Regroup.
Potentially assault ordering, charging.
That can assault orders in, motivated by coin, elusive escape, swift strike. You've got 2 ways in the base deck to retreat. You've got a way in your commander's deck to charge. You've got an extra zone on the tactics board that lets you make an attack. You've got, I think it's a 9-point Death Star, but it's not using your Baratheon or Stark pick, and I think it's actually got a lot of potential. So, we've gone through the Brotherhood without banners. There are a lot of options you've got. It is such a fun thing to build around with, and that's before you include Stark and Baratheon units. Now, I'm sure a lot of you guys out there that have any familiarity with Stark units or Baratheon units have been thinking, oh, wow, you could include this unit, we could include that unit. There are 15 Stark units and 15 Baratheon units you can pick from. So a total of 30 units that already exist you can draw on in building your Brotherhood list. Does that mean you need to buy all 30 boxes to be a Brotherhood player?
No,
absolutely not.
Like,
so
what are we talking about?
Yeah, no. What we want to do here is,
even if you did, of course, you would go to your local game store and support your local game store to do so. But not that I want to take money out of their pocket. You can buy the Brotherhood box, and these select few Stark and Baratheon boxes.
30 boxes right now at current MSRP, I think, is about $1,200. And while some 40K players out there might be thinking like,
that's a deal.
Wow, you can buy an entire faction for only $1,200? This game's so cheap. I guess you could, yeah. But if you're looking to get into Brotherhood and you don't have a Baratheon or Stark base, don't worry, we've got you covered. Tom, what should be on their Christmas wish list?
So what we really want to bring is the things that, in my opinion, are either hitting hard on their own or bring some utility.
Something unique.
Yes. One of my favorite units, which I used with varying results, is the House Umber Berserkers.
I'd run Beric Dondarrion in them for sure.
Yeah. Initially, they can get blown up kind of easily, so it is... With the healing they have in this faction, I think you can play pretty well, but it does take a little consideration. They're still one of my favorite units, and look, when you're throwing 9 dice at people's face, it is so fun. The next one on the list is the House Mormont She-Bears. I ran these for a long time, especially before Warcry got reworked, where it's only 1 token, because getting 2 tokens was fantastic, but it's still good. Warcry is morale test, which, hey, this faction loves passing morale tests. So that's another way to just get a bunch of bonuses on your different commanders and attachments and cards. Also, it's handing out a condition token, which is always good. I think Esad, you have a particular favorite thing you want to do with them.
I think Thoros loves these ladies. Thoros gets along real nice with the ladies because he's got his own faith ability. So she-bears are bringing a way to trigger their own morale test. So what you can be doing, the dream play, is you get yourself an 11 inches. You go ahead, you toss out a war cry to generate a token. You're already starting with one. You put out a vulnerable token. Then you fiery charge on in to put out the panic token as well, and now you're in melee range. You use one of those faith tokens to give yourself vicious and sundering. You've already got crit blow. So you're throwing 7 dice with rerolls, crit blow, sundering, vicious. Kingsmen eat your goddamn heart out. Yeah, you're hitting on 4s, but you got rerolls and 2 tokens. So you go ahead and blast them. They're probably failing the panic test. Now you can use another faith token to heal somebody in long range another 1 to 3 wounds. I think there's a lot of power there. And that's in a 6-point package.
Yeah, again, like you said, just combining the once per round, you're going to get a morale test off. More than likely, because they go from 6 morale down to 4 morale with Thoros. It has happened to me plenty of times where I bombed that 4, but if you don't roll my dice, you're good. So you're always going to be generating that faith token. Another unit that brings something kind of specific that is overall good is the Winterfell Guards. They are a 7-point unit. They bring good defense, good morale, decent attack profile. They have a couple things where they care about certain zones. They are a 7-point, which is an elite unit that also has adaptive. So even not even considering the 1 point you get for free as just being the Brotherhoods, you're getting another 1 point for free. So you can throw Hot Pie on there and just never be weakened, never be vulnerable, not care. Or you throw Barrack or Thoros attachments on there, and it can be 1 point or free. I love free relentless.
Do you like free resilience?
I love free resilience.
Oh, and they have secondary abilities on top of that. And again, you're paying a whopping 0 points for that. Obviously, yes, you could be spending some of those points on another attachment elsewhere, but that's a really solid 9-point infantry block that is worth every point that you would have spent that you didn't have to.
I really think that Gendry does have a home in this if you want a very tanky unit.
And that's something I think that these guys are really lacking. You would think you'd be looking at Baratheons for the solid defensive unit, but if you control crowns and horses, yes, okay, that's 2 zones you need to control. But if you control crowns and horses while you have Gendry in them, you have a resilient 2-5 unit moving speed 5 with precision. That's a hard unit to deal with.
Yeah, it's a big investment potentially, but it does pay for itself in some ways.
Especially with how maneuverable this faction is, I think that's a solid choice.
My next pick is another personal favorite of mine, is the House Mormont Bruisers. They're not super flashy, but they're just fun to use, and they are good. They're a good unit.
It works great with Lem, because you can stick Lem in there, and if you're 1 rank down, you can choose crit blow and precision off of the Bruisers, and then you can choose highest attack die value and rerolls off of the Battle Scars. So even a rank down, you've just doubled your power.
Yeah. So another unit that we hinted at when we were talking about Edric Dane is the Bog Devils. These are a bit more niche. I wouldn't recommend always bringing them as much as I would the other ones above I talked about recently.
It is a hilarious combo to put Stoneheart Influence and Cranag Poison on a unit of cavalry. Take your cavalry maneuver, take 3 wounds. Make your charge, take 3 wounds. You just lost half your tray for the courtesy of being an idiot.
I think it's one of those things that is good on paper and probably not as amazing in practice, but it's still funny.
It's very funny.
We don't do good things in this house. We do funny things.
We do funny things.
Now, okay, so
you want to talk about funny things? You got a funny thing ready for us.
Oh God, one of the units that's just gotten such a glow up over the last year. Your House Umber's Great Axes finally are in a place, I feel, where they live up to their name. So you have a unit that just potentially hand out 6 wounds from the attack if they all hit and you don't roll 6. So we're getting into some probability here, and then you're taking a -2 panic test. That's a lot. That's a lot of damage.
They push a lot of damage through.
But what's funny is if you throw Thoros in there, they charge in, they attack you with a panicked attack, do a lot of damage, and you go, okay, I'm going to clap you back. And you do. And then they attack again.
Relentless works really well with these guys. Beric Dondarrion, I think both as a commander and an attachment, because as an attachment, he can give them what they so desperately need, which is extra attack die. And if you really want to get greedy, you could try and get some peasants on in for a gang up. Theoretically, it's hard to pull off and it's costly, but you can use Beric to give them an extra 2 dice to get them throwing 8. And then you can get peasants on in there to get them throwing 9 on 2s, and only 6s are blocking. Plus, they're vicious, they're getting blown up.
Mm-hmm. It's a small synergy, but you could also bring Commander Stoneheart with them so that you can get the intimidating presence going. So you can really lean a little bit more into the panic attack.
I think Stoneheart's a really good place in these because it gives them a little bit of defense that they desperately need, because at a 4 or 5 unit with no defensiveness to them, they can get blown up by a lot of things. So I like what you're saying with the Horrific Visage Intimidating Presence.
Yeah.
Intimidating Presence helps push through more damage because they have very consistent damages since only 6s are blocking them, but they don't have a lot of damage. Mm-hmm. Intimidating Presence is really going to help them push through even more. Yeah. Lash Out is great. You think that you're safe getting these guys down to last rank. Just kidding. Now you're panicked and take 4 wounds, and now they're going to swing back at you. Yeah, they're only throwing 4 dice, but those 4 dice are all going to hit, and now you have an intimidating, vicious panic test.
Yeah, because there's some Lash Out. Like, oh, cool, you got me my last rank. Enjoy 4, and now you're dead.
So it's a pretty solid list. We got 6 boxes here for Starks, but I've noticed something in your list that you didn't mention. So Tully Cavaliers.
Yeah, the kind of. Currently, what is the best Cav pick in the game is definitely propping up Starks as one of the better factions right now.
And they're giving everyone in short range healing whenever they pass morale test. And as we talked about, these guys love morale tests. So why don't you have Tully Cavaliers in this list?
So they're a good unit. I would never say they're not a good unit. I just think to use that as my one Stark or Baratheon pick, I have the Sworn Knights right over here in faction that if I'm looking at it to fill a heavy cav role, I have a very good, more than very good, one of the best in my, maybe I'm wrong, heavy cav options in faction I don't have to spend a restricted slot for.
I agree. I think Tully Cavalier are a little bit of a trap here because they're a heavy cav that has a strong shock charge and does do well on the grind, but from a defensive aspect, like it's really hard to kill them. Lacking some of the spike damage that Starks have with, say, Northern Ferocity or Great John Umber's Berserker Tactics means that they're not going to be one-shotting units in this faction. Likewise, without Ned NCU, you're not getting the bonus heal on top whenever they're passing the morale test after an attack. Mm-hmm. And I just don't think this faction really wants to grind, especially because, like you said, they have a heavy cavalry unit already. What they don't have is an elite infantry unit.
Yeah.
And I think that's where some of these Baratheon picks start coming in. Because while we're talking about menaces, Tully Cavalier are the menace of the cavalry world. When you talk about cavalry, you have to look at Tully Cavaliers and compare it to that. When you're talking about infantry, especially elite infantry, you have to talk about Kingsmen. Kingsmen are an absolutely insane unit right now. I know I caused a little bit of controversy when I said that they probably need to be nerfed. I think I've been convinced out of that. I don't think Baratheon Kingsmen need to be nerfed. I do think that Kingsmen in this faction is going to be crazy. Kingsmen are packing a lot of damage. They're getting rerolls if your opponent doesn't have the crowns and critical blow. They're always packing sundering. They're a terrifying unit to deal with, and on top of that, they have To the Last. That can be comboed with Beric Dondarrion as the commander. That can be comboed with all of the healing this faction has that Baratheon wishes they have. Their damage can be comboed with all the mobility that Baratheons wish they had, but Brotherhood actually has. Kingsmen perform really well in Baratheons, and I think they're going to perform nuclearly well in Brotherhood. Kingsmen are going to be the sweaty pick that you go for. That said, I think there are a lot of other picks that you guys might want to consider when you're looking at units. Certain units that Baratheons have access to that have wanted the mobility that Brotherhood can bring, but have never been able to get. The first one I want to talk about is Thornwatch. They're a very skirmishy unit. They like to go in, punch, do some damage, retreat off to the flank and be a threat. And this faction wants that so bad. They want someone who has the ability to push through some consistent damage, and they have the mobility to give Thornwatch what they want. They have 2 different cards in the base deck that give them access to retreats, which Thornwatch want to be able to do all the time. They have access to assault orders and a commander that can help them charge to give them extra punch. I think Thornwatch are a really solid pick, and especially with the Sentinel that Beric Dondarrion is offering as a commander, don't discount Thornwatch. I think they're a really fun and strong pick. Likewise, we've got R'hllor Faithful. It looks like we have no reason to believe otherwise. Faith stacks. So you can put a Faith attachment like Thoros in R'hllor Faithful and get the benefit of both faiths. It's debatable whether you start the game with 2 faith tokens or 1, but quite frankly, even if you start the game with 1 faith token, you have got so much coming out of the R'hllor Faithful with being able to double faith on up. They're going to be gaining 2 faith tokens whenever they pass a panic test. They're going to have so many options to spend it on, and they've got the mobility to get in where they want and do that damage they're craving. Lastly, for the must picks, I would say for Baratheons, Riders of Highgarden. Now, I know Tom was just saying that Tully Cavalier are not ideal for the faction.
Yeah, it's, again, you're trying to fill a heavy cav role that is already kind of filled in the in-house in the Brotherhood, but the Riders of Highgarden aren't really a heavy cav, are they?
Not even a little bit. They're 6 points, so you're saving 2 points by going for the Riders of Highgarden. And again, when you've got access to 4-point activations over here and you're tossing in 6, we're looking at not just a solid 8 activation list, we could be looking at a 9 activation list with a cavalry unit that's speed 6, throwing 9 dice on the charge, sundering, hitting on 3s. And when you've got Disrupt Counter-Strike Peasants in the mix, you can easily be looking at a dice charge of 10 dice on 2s with Sundering in the flank. 4 6 points at speed 6. Riders of Highgarden, I think, are the... If you don't need to put your commander into a Stark or Baratheon unit, I think you want to take Riders of Highgarden as your flex pick.
Yeah.
There are a handful of honorable mentions I do want to go over because there are a lot of cool synergies. Rose Knights, we see a lot of healing, and man, do these guys love healing, and there's some mobility to get them in where they go. Crownland Scouts help you go even faster. Stag Knights are just a generally good infantry unit you could put stuff in. Sentinels are really cheap and can capitalize on the gang up that you're getting off peasants. Lightbringers are a solid range unit. Wardens or Halberds are a solid defensive unit that you can put on out there, put on a point, and chip away. The reason I don't recommend these necessarily as boxes to go out and buy, if you've got them already, by all means, try them out. But I wouldn't recommend them because I think a lot of these guys don't do what the Brotherhood wants to do. And I think what the Brotherhood wants to do is they want to stay on the move. They want to go around their opponents. They want to get flanks and rears. They want to get favorable charges. They want to whittle away at them and keep up their health a little bit. To an extent, they want to play the attrition game differently than Baratheons, and they want to play the charge game differently than Starks, but they still want to play both of those games. And I think there's a lot of Baratheon units that don't want to play the attrition game the way Brotherhood does, and they can't play the charge game. So, with that, I think the only thing left to talk about are the notable neutrals.
Yeah, there's a couple... Again, with the having to pick and juggle some of your NCU and commander choices, you're more than likely going to have to fill out your NCU list with some neutral picks. So, you kind of have the usual suspects. You have Varys, Peter, Shay, Tycho, Jaqen, Walder. Even if you... Walters, don't bring Walder.
Don't bring Walder.
Just don't. All of those are fantastic choices on their... Like, even in a vacuum, they're all just good. Shay brings particularly something good. Brings again that little bit of healing. It gets 1 point of healing, but again, when this faction has a lot of 1 or 2 instances of healing that add up a lot over time, also brings you a good source of just handing out a weakened token.
And that's better than healing. There's nothing better than preventing the damage to begin with, especially when you've got a disrupt chaff infantry unit. The weakened's going to go so far for you.
Tycho, I think Tycho's just good. Tycho's always been good. Healing 5 points top of the round across however many units you can heal is fantastic. It can be a crutch when you are just learning the faction. Then it can be a secret tech when you've mastered the faction. He's just good. Possibly a little tough to fit in with 5 points. We'll have to see when we get down to list building after a while.
And then Varys and Peter are just generally good. Varys is giving you value when your opponent is taking a tactic zone, and Peter is giving you a different kind of value when you take a tactic zone. Again, we talked about how important it is to have a replacement zone for the crowns. Peter is bringing that. Peter is bringing a once per game that might help you make sure you control a zone that you really want, such as for Winterfell Guard. And then Jaqen is just kind of funny if you're comboing it with Catelyn Stark or the Lady of High Heart. I think it's cool to kind of clone that. I'm not a huge fan of double influences. I never run triple influences. And I think if you're running Caitlyn, you're always going to want to run High Heart too, and it's hard to run Jaqen. So I think it's tough to double up on Caitlyn.
In terms of our neutral unit selections, we have a couple. I wouldn't say every. Well, obviously you can't bring Boltons. There's again specifically with Caitlyn, you cannot bring Boltons. But honestly, why would you?
If you're running Beric, I don't think he has anything that the Boltons really want. And if you're not running Beric, you're running Caitlyn, in which case you can't. So I don't see you running Boltons. You have a really spicy pick, though.
Yeah. So first off the top, we have our Stormcrow Dervishes. Again, something we've talked about that can just dance around this table, just on their own. And then you can throw Edric, Thoros. You can throw Beric on. Just so many. It's a lot of things. A lot of healing. A lot of dancing. A lot of things this faction wants to do.
Edric alone in Stormcrow Dervishes, I think, is really solid. I think there's a really solid list out there that puts Beric Dondarrion in Kingsmen and Edric Dane in Stormcrow Dervishes. Edric Dane's going to be able to give you vassal, so you've got assault orders triggering for charges for Stormcrow Dervishes and Kingsmen. I think you've got a really solid list there. If you add in Thoros, if you can find the 2 points for it, honestly, I think you're going to have the funniest list this side of the Mississippi.
Yeah, it's very silly. I
want to try it so bad.
Yeah. So this is a pick I brought up while discussing neutrals. You seem to really like the Bloody Mum Resources.
You brought it up because I was talking about Riders of Highgarden, because before we had this, we talked a lot about Telecavalier, and we both I agreed with you, Tom, that you already have a heavy cav option. You don't have a light cav option. Why would you waste your pick on something you have when you could pick something you don't have? And you brought up, well, you could always take Sources.
Yeah, they're a neutral unit, so they're not picking up your Stark or Baratheon slot. They're 6 points.
But speed 6. They're not that much less durable. They're 5-7 as opposed to Riders 5-6. Riders don't have Jack on the grind. They're throwing 5 dice on 4s, whereas Zorses are throwing 6 dice on 3s, but you have Motley Armaments, which is going to be giving you +1 attack die and crit blow or shutting off abilities.
Yeah.
And I think that's really valuable.
And then when you combine that with Gang Up from your peasants, you're throwing even more dice.
We could be looking at 8 dice and 2, and you're averaging 5 points in activation between Zorses and peasants.
So it's something... I wouldn't say you would always throw it in every list, but if you're trying to get some speed and you don't want to use up your faction slot, it's definitely worth considering.
This is a reason for me to paint my Zorses finally. And if you haven't painted your Stormcrow archers yet, I think this is also a good time. These archers are solid, don't get me wrong, but they kind of suck if they're shooting someone in the face. Stormcrow archers, on the other hand, are doing pretty well even when you're shooting someone in the face, and you have independence when it comes to the tactics board. Your deck doesn't care about any of the zones, so you can go ahead and play the little mini game where you accumulate all the Stormcrow archer zones and really get some value out of it, especially because I think there's really only one neutral commander pick that's worth taking with this faction. We'll talk about him at the very end of our neutral section, but I think Stormcrow archers are worth picking. A really nice slew of neutrals that you can take is another one that Tom brought up.
Oh, yeah. Again, they've changed a bit since the last season where they were kind of the kings of the castle, but particularly the Golden Company swordsmen were seen everywhere, and every faction had them.
Season 3 was Golden Company swords.
Yes. So Golden Company swords, Golden Company crossbowmen too, and even your Golden Company elephants.
I'm so excited for the elephant. With the point reduction for the attachments in this, I think you can feasibly field the Golden Company Officer. Golden Company Officer is only going to cost you 1 point in Brotherhood, which is going to give you the rest of the points you need to go ahead and take the 6-point Elephant. Obviously, we've got some funny combinations there with Gang Up. You could theoretically put these guys in Stormcrow Mercs, still be under your 12-point neutral cap, and pay 0 points for Golden Company Officer and get yourself your Elephant.
Yeah, and with Gang Up, it's nutty.
It's nutty. And then finally, I think for our neutral picks, we're looking at Lycene Pirates, the Sellswords.
Yeah, they're a unit I've never particularly gotten to work, but a lot of people say that they're very, very good. And I'm not disagreeing with that. It's just my brain is too small for that.
I think Barrack Dondarrion's giving them a little bit of extra aggression and a little extra mobility to really leverage out the fact that you're getting a lot of damage for a 5-point package. But Thoros is where it's really at. Thoros is giving them 2 more keywords. He's dropping their morale 2 points. He's going to make it really easy for them to get a charge. And once they get a charge with Criplo, they're going to get a rank and they're going to get a pillage token. So Thoros and Pirates, once you get that first pillage token, which is so easy, you're going to be saving 5 up armor, 4 up morale.
Mm-hmm.
And then they've got their own healing in there to go on top of the rest of the healing that you have. Lycene Pirates will burn fast, they will burn bright, and you could just last kiss Thoros on out when he's about to die and put him into She-Bears.
Yeah, or just anything else.
Or just anything else. It's a neutral pick, so you still have your Baratheon or Stark pitch, which I think is amazing.
And because it's Last Kiss, you can throw them anywhere, as long as it's not a Cav unit, but still.
Yeah.
So you can do so many silly things.
I think there's a lot of solid neutral options here. Let's talk about some of the neutral attachments now.
Yeah, first one on the list is pretty obvious. He's a newer model, but he's pretty, not, I wouldn't say ubiquitous, but made a lot of play. Sandor Clegane, I'm just going to threaten you all day.
It's good.
That's it.
People kind of dookied on a little bit when Martell's got a generic attachment with Threaten. But then people realized, oh, my faction isn't in Martell's. I can't spit out weakened tokens like nothing. I need Sandor.
And Threaten did get changed to be start of turn instead of start activation.
Yeah.
So it's a lot easier to get that off.
What's really interesting about bringing Sandor, though, is when you've got an extra point for attachments to work around with, you can actually bring the second half of his attachment combo that's locked behind, which is Arya Stark. Arya Stark has got the ability that whenever a friendly unit within a certain range loses a rank, you can go ahead and put an order token on her. You can expend an order token when her unit makes an attack to snipe out an attachment. She can go in peasants.
Yeah, because you just want to walk up, do something, and they just have to make the attack.
You want peasants to gum up the enemy commander. The enemy commander is going to take a rank off of peasants, and then Arya is going to kill the enemy commander.
Because it doesn't have to hit. Doesn't matter.
It doesn't. And with Regroup and Reform, you could just take Arya to where she needs to be next. And it'd always be fun to try and get Arya, Hot Pie, and Gendry all in the same list, especially if you can get Evil Mom in there somewhere.
Yeah, it's true.
Evil Mom could give them rerolls. Speaking of nasty combos, we've also got Bronn.
Bron's just good.
Bronn's just good.
I think his favorite home is in a range unit.
Putting him in the Brotherhood Archers is so good.
Yeah, just lots of attacks.
You can so easily get into the flank. And once you get there, especially if you're using something like the extra mobility you've got in the kit, you're going to have a ranged unit in your flank. And that ranged unit is going to have 2 boards off the tactics board they can shoot you with. Mm-hmm. Especially if you're running something like Peter Baelish, you're not going to be able to stop them from making 2 attacks on you off the tactics board if they're going first. And if you're going first, you need to do something. If you take horses to wheel around to look at them so they don't have the flank bonus, they're still going to take one of those 2 zones and shoot you. It's a lose-lose scenario.
Yeah, and if he's claiming the bags to shoot you, they go down to 5/5, which it's not nothing.
It sure does help.
The last 2 combinations are the Glory Seeker and or the Fortune Seeker. Getting, again, that the motivated by coin attack is on your Sword Knights. It's probably pretty good.
Dauntless goes so well with them too because they already have a solid morale at a 5. You're gonna be healing when you get attacked. You're gonna have motivated by coin to give yourself some extra attacks off the zone. But I think you still have a point with Glory Seeker because again their morale is already pretty good. Giving them Iron Resolve is going to have them saving at a 4, and then Stubborn Tenacity will have them deal wound. And again, that's going to be a place where they're going to be doing so well on the grind.
Yeah.
And they're going to get a lot closer in comparison to Tully Cavaliers.
Yeah, that's basically doing what you ideally would want to do with the Tully Cav anyway, but it's costing you, the same. It's the same 9 points, but again, that Stark unit slot is not taken to do that, which you can do so many other things with.
The final neutral pick that I think is worth noting is Jokun Commander. Obviously, I don't think we want to look much at Roose or Ramsay Bolton because we're restricting our list building even more by doing so, and I don't really think they offer much to the Brotherhood that the Brotherhood cares for. Likewise, Dario sucks ass, and then Vargo Hoat, I don't really think there are many units in this faction that can really make use of that brutal aggression that he's got with a panic bomb, other than maybe again running him in something like Kingsman. But I mean, it's okay. It's not great. Jokun, on the other hand, I think synergizes really well. This is a faction that is happy doing all of their damage through range attacks. They don't have many units that are like, I need to get in melee and do my jam. You are totally happy putting Brotherhood archers on one side of the map and then Jokun in Stormcrow archers on the other side, and just pincering around, using your mobility to get your archers into the flank and pushing through damage. You've got diversion tactics that is now comboing with sudden retreat for even more mobility. You have another auto pass panic test in your deck, and then you've got what Brotherhood wants the most. Jokun's also going to be bringing the Widower, which is another free attachment. So you can be loading up every single one of your units with an attachment, which I think is always just fun. It makes a more dynamic battlefield. Plus, I think the Widower could actually go in Peasants.
Widower can go kind of anywhere.
Widower can go anywhere, but Peasants want to just get gummed up and they want to duke it out. Hold the Line's going to actually give them a considerable threat in terms of damage, and it's going to give them Sundering. Okay, you're not going to be doing too much there, but it's something.
Yeah, and then you can get gang up on. If you can trigger gang up, you're throwing. That's a real threat.
With so many trays on the table, you're probably going to be getting some pretty solid value out of Brothers in Arms for extra dice.
If they're attacking your peasants, they're not attacking something else.
Exactly. So looking at this faction as an entirety, I would give it an A+ for design. I think this is one of the coolest designs of a faction I've seen. Not only are there so many cool combinations and permutations that you can make with the list, but to an extent, it's almost kind of fun to have to figure out, I can't take this because of this, because I have this. I have Barrack here, so I can't take Caitlyn here. And it really makes it interesting when you're making a competitive pairing of lists that I find fun. As an overall strength metric, I would give this a B+. I think this faction is obviously going to perform better than Bolton's. I think it's going to perform better than Night's Watch. I even think it's going to perform better than Stark's. I think it's going to be on par with Baratheons and Lannisters, maybe somewhere in the same ballpark as Greyjoys. I think Targaryens and Martells aren't going to struggle that much with these guys.
Yeah, I don't really see that.
I think we're in the upper middle of the pack.
Yeah. Honestly, in my mind as a Stark player, these guys look kind of how I wish Starks looked. Honestly, overall, yeah. It's like if I could take Starks and just mold them into these guys, I would be perfectly happy.
That concludes our in-depth analysis of Brotherhood with Broken Banners. If you guys have any thoughts on these guys, go ahead, leave them in the comments. Let us know what you think.
Because we won't read them. Just kidding.
I sure will. And you can be damn sure I'm going to be breaking every single one of these guys' banners.
Oh, God. You break them and glue them together, or just break them and leave them on the ground.
I'll have to figure that out.
Some good basing. It comes with free basing material.
Free basing. All right, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. I really appreciate it, and I look forward to talking to you guys in my next one.